Chapter 7. Valerius Manor loomed over the village, dramatically set against the crags of the Carpathian Mountains. Clearly, the princess's family had been here for a long time. Van Helsing followed Anna through the house to a large door that she pushed open, revealing the family armory. 4 centuries of lethal-looking weaponry sat in cases and on racks, broadswords and short swords, sabres and scimitars, as well as maces, spears, and simple clubs. Van Helsing recognized most but not all of the weapons, and there were some he had seen only in books. Now he was impressed. Carl was looking about wide-eyed as well, seeing that the tools around them had been crafted by the hands of masters. Turning, Anna inquired, "So how did you get here?" "We came across the sea," Carl replied immediately. Anna was uncharacteristically curious. "Really? The sea? The Adriatic Sea?" Then she seemed to catch herself in her enthusiasm, instantly reasserting her iron control. Van Helsing could see that she wanted information from them, but she also needed to show that she was in charge, which explained why she had purposely brought them to this room to talk. Normally he would have liked to parry with her, and he would have enjoyed the struggle for dominance, but he had a job to do, and little time in which to do it. The brides would have reported to their master by now. "Where do I find Dracula?" he asked. "He used to live in this very house, 4 centuries ago, but no one knows where he lives now," Anna replied, gesturing at a huge oil painting that covered an entire wall. It was a rich and fantastical map of Transylvania, the work of both a master artist and mapmaker. "My father would stare at that for hours, looking for Dracula's lair," she mused. She grabbed a sword from a rack, an iron mace, and then some throwing stars. Anna was courageous, given what he had seen of the power of the vampires so far. However, even if these weapons could hurt the Count or his brides, they would not kill them. "So that's why you've come, to destroy Dracula," she said. "I can help you," he said. "No one can help me," she replied, resignation in her voice. There it was, she was not only ready to fight but ready to lay down her life. The princess took a breath and added, "You can die trying. All of my family has. I can handle this myself." "So I noticed," Van Helsing said. The princess spun around, her face suffused with anger. "The vampires attacked in the daylight, they never do that. I was unprepared. It won't happen again," she declared, her tone defiant. "Why did they attack in the daylight?" he asked, clearly wondering why the vampires would put their lives at risk. "Clearly they wanted to catch me off guard. They seem almost desperate to finish off my family." There was something important there, Van Helsing could feel it. "Why is that? Why now?" "You ask a lot of questions." Van Helsing shook his head. "Usually I ask only 2, what are we dealing with? And how do I kill it?" Anna kept moving, strapping on a metal breastplate and 2 spiked gauntlets. "My father spent most of his life looking for answers, year after year." She gestured out the window at the castle tower. "Tearing apart that tower, combing through the family archives." Van Helsing shot Carl a look. The friar was still admiring the weaponry. "The tower. Start there," he said. "Right," Carl said, and did nothing. He merely stared at Van Helsing, as if he were waiting for something. "Now?" he finally asked. Van Helsing's only response was a glare. "Right. The tower. Now," Carl said, and quickly exited. Oblivious, Anna seized a scabbard, strapped it to her waist, and headed for the swords. Once again, Van Helsing recognized that what she was doing was noble and brave. It also wasn't going to do them any good. He stood in her path. "The only way to save your family is to stay alive until Dracula is killed," he said. "And who will kill him if not me? Who will show the courage if not me? If you go out there alone, you'll be outmanned and outpositioned." He pointed out the window at the growing dusk and added, "And you can't see in the dark." Anna laughed him off and moved forward. Van Helsing took the opportunity to close the gap between them until he was inches from her face. There was something familiar about her eyes, a look he had seen before. Not only was she prepared to die, but she did not expect to live to see another day. Van Helsing had two problems with this. First, half of his assignment was to protect her. Second, he needed her and what she knew to help him with the other half of his assignment, to destroy Dracula. Now that Mr. Hyde had finally been dispatched once and for all, his record was perfect. He had never failed to complete an assignment, and he didn't intend to start now. Van Helsing stared into her eyes and said, "In the morning, we'll hunt him together." Anna studied him before she spoke. "Some say you're a murderer, Mr. Van Helsing. Others say you're a holy man. Which is it?" "A bit of both, I think." He felt a moment of relief. He had convinced her. It wasn't much of a victory, but it seemed like all he would get from her today. A slight smile creased Anna's face. "I promised you a drink. The bar is down the hall. Help yourself. As for me..." Her face was set and the hint of humor left her eyes. "I'm going." So much for victory. Anna grabbed a sword and slammed it into her scabbard. "I'm sorry you have to carry this burden," Van Helsing said. "On the contrary," she said, "I would wish for it to be no other way." Van Helsing saw that she meant it. What was it that motivated her? He knew what drove him. He wanted to know who he was and reclaim his past. Also, it was simply what he did. He was good at it, and that was just enough to tide him over his long moments of doubt. There was strength in her, but there was something else at work. Her family? Its tradition? To his surprise, Van Helsing found that he was genuinely curious about her, about things that weren't directly connected to the matter at hand, to his assignment. That was unusual for him. Of course, it would all be moot if the princess got herself killed. He watched as she grabbed a vicious-looking helmet, black metal with sharp metal flanges. "I'm sorry about your father and brother," he said, trying to stall her. Perhaps if he got her to think about their sacrifices she would think a moment about how best to achieve the goals they died for. "I will see them again," she replied. She saw something in his face and added, "We Transylvanians always look on the brighter side of death." "There's a brighter side of death?" "Yes, it's just harder to see." With that, the princess pulled her helmet on and started to charge out of the room. Van Helsing grabbed her arm, spun her around, and held one hand palm up between their faces. Then, with a single sharp breath, he blew the blue powder from his hand into her face. The princess fell backward against a wall, out cold. Van Helsing caught her before she sank to the floor. "I'm sorry about that too." He had kept her from going out into the night to face Dracula alone. Another small victory, but after today, Van Helsing decided that he would take what he could get. "Listen to your brother," Mama said. Anna stood there, mute and fuming. "Anna," Mama said, raising her voice. "I am ready," she replied. "It's too dangerous," Vulcan said. "I can handle myself, even Papa says." Anna mustered all the defiance she could. "Papa isn't here, and until he is," Vulcan said, "I don't have to listen to you." Anna cursed silently when she realized that her voice was too high, nearly a shriek. Then she turned and said, "Mama?" Her mother smiled, and Anna knew she wasn't going to like what came next. "Anna, in a few years." "But I'm not a child." Again, Anna couldn't control the pitch of her voice. Mama smiled again and Anna wanted to scream. "But, darling, you are a child. You're only 12. Don't be in such a hurry." "Vulcan is only 14, Anna replied. 2 years older than you," Vulcan said pointedly. "You only let him go because he's a boy," Anna said. Mama just sighed by way of an answer. After a moment Vulcan stepped forward and said gently, "Anna, Papa has new plans. If we're lucky, This will all be over before you are old enough to go. You may never have to do what we are about to do." His soft voice, the condescending look of concern on his face. Out of nowhere, tears sprang from her eyes, which horrified her. Immediately she turned away and ran for her bedroom. It was too much. He didn't understand, and neither did Mama. They wanted to protect her as if she were a helpless child, but she wasn't. She was strong, and good with a sword, almost as good as Vulcan. Most of all, she wanted to help. She wanted her parents to be proud of her, and she wanted Vulcan to see her for what she was, his equal. Papa came home less than an hour later, but Anna did not go down to see him. Instead she crept to the stairs and listened while Papa, Mama, and Vulcan talked in the armory. Vulcan and Mama were laughing as they told Papa about their earlier argument. Papa did not join in. He only said to Mama, "She is willful, darling. She gets that from her father." The clear pride in his voice gave Anna a rush of pleasure. She waited quietly for the men from the village to come and for the group to collect their weapons and leave. Afterwards she raced to her room and waited for Mama, who came to bring her some tea. "Are you all right, Anna?" "Yes, I'm sorry about before." "It's all right. Please remember, we just want what's best for you, even Vulcan," she said. "I know, Mama." Then, thankfully, her mother left. Anna waited until she heard Mama's own bedroom door close before she moved. She would have liked to wait until Mama was asleep, but she knew that her mother would not rest until Papa and Vulcan returned from the hunt. Anna put on her riding clothes, choosing all black because it would give her the best cover in the darkness. Looking out the window, she saw the full moon hanging low in the sky. It was the first night of the harvest moon, the brightest one of the year. In other lands, she knew that the light of the harvest moon allowed farmers to work their fields late into the night. Here, that was obviously impossible, but someday it would happen again. Thanks to her family, and maybe to her, the harvest moon would once again be a symbol of life and not one of fear and death. She crept down the stairs and slipped into the armory. The servants were all shut up in their rooms. As a rule, people moved as little as possible during full moons, which allowed Anna to move freely throughout the house. She did not take any armor, since she didn't want anything slowing her down. Anna would have to hurry to catch up with her father. She imagined the moment when she found him. He would be angry at first, but he would have to let her remain with him for the duration of the hunt. When he saw how she carried herself, he would have to admit that she was ready. When it was over, he would be proud of her. Anna took a sword, one of the larger sabers. It was a little heavy, but she would be damned if she let Vulcan see her carrying a child's short sword. Then she grabbed some throwing stars and the most important weapon of all, a silver dagger. Anna went to the window and opened it. Any of the doors to the outside were out of the question. There would be noise and a chance that someone would hear and try to stop her. She climbed onto the windowsill and swung her legs out, holding herself still for a moment. She felt a pang of guilt for deceiving her family and actively disobeying her parents' wishes, but her father had said it himself. She was willful. In a little while, her family was going to find out just what she could do. Holding onto the windowsill, Anna lowered herself as far as she could, then dropped. It wasn't far, but the landing rattled her. She was outside, on her own, during a full moon. It felt wonderful. The strength of her ancestors coursed through her veins as she prepared to join the family's great battle. She knew where her father was going to begin and headed out in that direction at a trot. Anna had gone only a few steps when she heard a howl, the sound causing a chill to run down her spine. It was the unmistakable call of a werewolf, deeper and more resonant than an ordinary wolf. The urge to stop and hide swept over her, but she forced herself to keep going, though at a careful walk now. Anna strained to hear any sign of the hunting party or of its unearthly prey. There was nothing but the normal sounds of the night and the whistling of the wind, but they sounded like doom to her. She had the feeling that she was being watched from all sides. The only comfort she had was that if a werewolf had seen her, it wouldn't have waited to pounce. For half an hour, Anna trudged through the fields and scattered trees until she reached the woods. She was tempted to call out for her father, a move that would be not only foolish but suicidal. What if I can't find them? One of the first rules of the hunt was that no one ever went out alone. Werewolves were much more likely to pick off people on their own, as she was. A twig snapped somewhere to her left, and her head spun in that direction. There was a sound like footfalls. Her heart began to pound, and she told herself that it must be the rustling of the wind on the leaves. The wind. She remembered that the wind was important. It carried sense, and the sense of smell was one of the werewolves' keenest. Anna had to stay upwind of the beast so it didn't catch her scent, but how could she do that if she didn't know where it was? As for herself, Anna could smell only the slightly damp fallen leaves. The forest was dead silent. There were no small animals scurrying about, not even the song of crickets in the night. There could be only one reason for this, a dark force at work, a predator afoot that all the other creatures feared. Suddenly, Anna wanted her room and the comfort of her warm bed, and considered heading back home. If she was lucky, she could slip back into the house and no one would ever know she had been gone. But pride kept her from going back. Instead she followed the path that ran at the foot of the mountains. Her father had shown it to her before in the safety of daylight. Fear kept Anna's senses sharp as she remained on the lookout for any sign of danger. Then she definitely heard the sound of footfalls. That's him, that's Papa, she thought. The sounds of movement came closer. She approached a clearing in the trees and stopped, not wishing to step out into the open until she was sure it was her father's hunting party and not their quarry. Then silence, except for the breeze through the trees. Perhaps it had just been her imagination. Enough was enough, she would go back home. Next time, she would just convince Papa to let her come with him. Anna turned to head for Valerius Manor. And then for the first time in her life saw a werewolf in the flesh. The monster loomed above her, blocking her path. It was more than 7 feet tall, powerfully muscled, and standing on its hind legs like a man, its breath blowing white vapor in the cool moonlit night. The creature's face was more wolf than human, with large pointed ears and a pronounced snout with large canine teeth. The only quality that distinguished it from the face of an animal was the terrible intelligence in its eyes. Standing less than 10 yards away, the creature was utterly still and silent, watching her. Anna's heart seemed to stop, then thunder in her chest. She felt a scream building in her throat but held it down. She had to remain calm. There was something she had to do. The sword. Slowly she reached for it with her right hand. The werewolf watched her with interest but didn't move. Feeling the hilt of the weapon with her fingers, Anna knew she would have only one chance at this. If she didn't strike the wolf hard and fast, she would never get close enough to use the dagger. Pulling up on the sword, Anna felt it catch in the scabbard. Panics began to well up inside her and Anna fought it. Then she realized that the tip of the scabbard had gotten stuck in the ground. She cursed her pride, which had not allowed her to bring a shorter sword that she could draw easily. Angling the weapon backward, she was able to slowly draw it. The quiet was broken by the werewolf's growl, and Anna simultaneously did 2 things. She shrieked and let go of the sword. When the creature took a step toward her, Anna instinctively ran for her life. Something hit her and she flew forward into the clearing. The werewolf had struck her from behind. She twisted around to see it looming over her from just a few feet away. I'm finished. Fear mixed with humiliation filled her. Mama and Velkin were right, she was just a silly girl who would die this night, and her parents would probably never even know what had happened to her. Her last act would be to bring shame to the family Valerius. Will he kill me immediately? She wondered. Or will he play with me for a while before he eats me? The werewolf looked down at her, and she had seconds before it struck. Raising its head, it gave a howl so loud and deep that she could feel it resonating in her chest. Suddenly, Anna grabbed the silver dagger at her side and leapt to her feet. Before a plan had even formed in her mind, she was hurling herself at the beast, even as she felt something strike her hard on one side. She was airborne again, and then she felt nothing. Seconds or minutes or hours later, Anna opened her eyes. As she tried to clear her head, she realized she was on her back and being dragged forward. But that was impossible, because she had to be dead. Anna willed her blurred vision to clear. Hazily she saw the back of the werewolf walking in front of her. Its large clawed hand clutched her boot-encased foot, and the beast was dragging her along like a dead rabbit. Somehow she was still alive. The creature pulled her into a clearing, where she saw another werewolf waiting. This one was smaller, perhaps an adolescent. In an instant, Anna understood. The adult werewolf hadn't spared her, it had carried her off to feed its young. She tried to pull her foot out of the creature's iron grasp. It held her firmly as she struggled and screamed. "Papa!" she cried over and over. "Help me, Papa!" The werewolf paid no attention. It grabbed her with both hands, tossing her in front of the younger creature, who let out a howl of its own. Dazed from the fall, Anna was too frightened to even scream. She waited for it to pounce and saw a flash of movement, but it wasn't the creature. Something small flew across her field of vision and into the chest of the young werewolf. Anna saw the Valerius family crest on the hilt of the weapon buried in the creature's breast. It was her brother's silver dagger. "Anna, run!" Vulcan's voice boomed. She could do nothing but watch the young monster double over and loudly whimper. Vulcan had hit it directly in the heart. It fell at Anna's feet, dead. The elder werewolf screamed in rage and whirled on Vulcan, whom she could now see standing at the edge of the clearing. Her brother had his sword out in front of him, an open challenge to the creature. He was alone. "Run, Anna!" he shouted. This was all wrong. Where was Papa? Where were the others? They must have split up to look for her. Papa had the revolver with the silver bullets, otherwise Vulcan would have used it already. The werewolf attacked, swinging at Vulcan, who struck out with the sword, catching the monster on the arm and rolling under it. As it howled in pain, Vulcan jumped to his feet. The creature struck again and Vulcan parried with the sword, connecting with the beast's other arm. The werewolf bellowed again. This couldn't last long. Vulcan could injure the werewolf with his blade, but without silver he could not kill it. Her brother seemed to realize the same thing and yelled out again, "Anna, run, get out of here." No, she thought, if I go, Vulcan will be left alone, and then it will just be a matter of time. I may be a child, but I'm not completely helpless. That's my brother out there. Anna was on her feet, reaching for the pocket that held her throwing stars. Vulcan was knocked on his back, sword out, the monster above him. There was no more time to think. She grabbed the stars with her left hand, and one by one she passed them to her right and let them fly. 1.2.3.4. 5.6. The werewolf screamed in pain and turned to face her. Vulcan jumped up and thrust forward with his sword. The blade went into the creature's back and came out in front. It roared, clawing at the weapon, which had been wrenched out of Vulcan's grasp. The monster spun around in a circle, pulling at the sword from both front and back. It didn't budge. Anna felt a twinge of hope. Vulcan had hurt it, badly. But it was not enough. They couldn't kill it with 100 steel swords. They needed a silver dagger. Anna searched the clearing for the other werewolf. For a crazy moment, she thought it had disappeared, until she saw that it had transformed. The monster was gone, and in its place was a boy of perhaps 13, her brother's knife sticking out of his chest. He's just a little older than I am, she thought. Then she pushed the thought aside. Running to the boy, she pulled out the dagger. The older werewolf had given up trying to extract the sword. Unsteady on its feet, the monster was eyeing Vulcan. The werewolf began to close in on her brother. Could she hit it with the dagger from where she was? No, It was too far. To kill it instantly, she would have to aim directly for the heart, otherwise it would live long enough to kill or bite her brother. And the bite was worse than a death sentence. Vulcan! Anna called out, and threw the knife to him. It sailed end over end toward her brother, who held out his hand. If he misses, she thought. But Vulcan caught it. He drew his arm back and threw it without hesitating. The dagger caught the werewolf in the center of its chest. It barely had time to clutch at the knife before it fell over in a dead heap. Anna watched in horrified fascination as the beast shrank into the form of a man of about Papa's age. It shed the skin of the wolf, revealing the person underneath. A moment later the hide of the creature disappeared, leaving only the man. Vulcan was in front of her, grasping her by the shoulders, concern on his face. "Are you hurt? Did it hurt you? Did it bite you?" Anna took a quick inventory of herself, scrapes and bruises but no cuts, and more importantly, no bites. "No, okay." Her brother took that in and Anna waited for what would come next, the shouts, the recriminations. She deserved them all. But as she watched her sibling's face, he did something that shocked her more than anything else had in her young life. Vulcan burst into tears. His face just collapsed as he hugged her tightly and fell to his knees, still clutching her to him. "I thought we'd lost you," he said between sobs. Anna hugged her brother back, her own tears mixing with his. In her mind, she begged his forgiveness and promised herself and God that she would never let Vulcan or the rest of her family down again. Vulcan, Anna thought as she woke up. He was alive. She had just seen him. No, it was a dream. Though she had visions of her brother every night since his death, this was the one she had most often. That made sense. It was the first time she had failed her family and her brother. The second time was a month ago, when Vulcan paid with his life. Hot grief ran through her body. Like every morning for the month, the last cycle of the moon, she felt her brother die again. Anna shook herself awake. Something was wrong. It was still dark and she shouldn't be here, she should be out there fighting. Van Helsing. He had done this to her, drugged her and put her to sleep so that she would not go out alone. He was impossible. He had no right. To what? To save your life? To keep you from making the same mistake you made when you were 12? A voice in her head demanded. No, he had no right to interfere. She was still wearing her clothes, though her armor and weapons had been removed. She cursed under her breath and quickly sat up. Pain shot through her skull, and her hand went to her head. "Oh my God, that hurts. That son of a bitch." Ignoring her screaming headache, she leapt out of bed and stormed for the door. Once in the hallway, she realized that the house was deathly quiet, not unusual for a full moon, but after the action-charged day, Anna found herself exceptionally alert. She was pleased to feel the grogginess from the drug Van Helsing had blown into her face begin to lift. The light from the lanterns hanging on the wall was dim, but enough for her to see for several yards in any direction. She pricked up her ears, but heard nothing except for the rain against the windows. There was a creak, normal for the family house, given its age. Reaching up, she took a lantern off the wall. A minute or so later she was in the armory, the place where she felt safest. Another creak. Suddenly she knew that someone else was nearby. In that moment, she felt like a 12-year-old girl again. Van Helsing? Anna called loudly. Another noise came from somewhere near the cases that held her family's arms. She scanned the gloom of the armory. Cocking her arm holding the lantern, she prepared to strike at whoever or whatever it was. She moved toward the source of the sound and slowly peeked around a corner. A window had been left open, and the wind and rain were knocking the shutters against the wall. Cursing herself for being such a fool, Anna breathed a sigh of relief and pulled the window closed, her eyes fixing on the full moon hanging outside. As she turned away, she saw the wet paw prints on the floor. Her breath caught in her throat, but she forced her eyes to follow the prints to the center of the room. Where they stopped. One of them was in here, with her. Setting her lantern down, Anna grabbed a morning star from its mount. She could sense its presence. Her instincts were screaming, but she had no idea where the creature was. Readying herself, she weaved through the cases of her family's deadly weaponry. Anna was no longer a frightened 12-year-old girl, she was a grown woman who had seen her share of fighting and death. If there was a werewolf in her family's house, she was prepared to give it the last surprise of its unholy life. A long, low growl resonated through the room. Anna froze in the middle of the armory and drew her arm back, ready to strike a blow. A single drop of rain fell onto her cheek. Anna instantly looked up and had no trouble making out the werewolf among the shadows. It was dangling from a beam above her, its eyes staring down. The creature roared, and Anna ran for the door. Turning the corner of one of the weapon cases, she felt her body slam into something. The werewolf, her mind supplied. Anna screamed and started to swing the weapon, but the creature grabbed her hands. No, not the creature, a man. Vulcan. She was too stunned to speak or move. Relief and then joy flooded through her, and the month of grief and of missing her brother briefly disappeared. In that moment even the werewolf in the room was forgotten. Vulcan. Oh my God. You're alive. Quiet, Anna, I only have a moment. Then she remembered, but, Vulcan, there's a werewolf. His face was deadly serious. Never mind that. Listen to me. I know Dracula's secrets. He has. Vulcan hesitated and said, Mumblich.Naga. Lochen. A struggle played out on his face. Vulcan was hurt. He couldn't seem to control his mouth, and his clothes were torn nearly to shreds. Then Vulcan started to spasm and jerk as if losing control of much more than his mouth. Suddenly he lurched to the wall and climbed it. Anna's mind protested. No, the werewolf is up there. A terrible realization began to dawn on her. She saw Vulcan turn his head to the window, where the full moon appeared from behind the cloud cover. Anna! Run! He shouted. No. He was her brother. He needed help, no matter what was happening to him. Before her eyes, Vulcan began to change. His body seemed to relax, then increase in size. For a second, it looked as if there was something inside him too large for his skin, which began to bulge and move in odd ways, ripping and shredding until the werewolf underneath emerged. This was not her brother. It couldn't be. The door burst open, and Van Helsing raced in with his guns drawn. Anna turned back to see the werewolf throw itself through the door to the balcony, raining glass and water into the armory as Van Helsing ran up to her. Are you all right? Before she could respond, Van Helsing was already at the balcony and looking outside for the creature. For Vulcan. Van Helsing watched as the creature climbed horizontally across the side of the manor house. After a few steps, it vaulted off, splashing down into the river and heading into the village. There was a noise from inside, and Van Helsing spun around to see Carl entering the armory. Sniffing the air, the friar said, "Why does it smell like wet dog in here?" Van Helsing holstered his revolvers and headed for the door. Werewolf. Ah. Right. You'll be needing silver bullets, then, Carl replied. He began to scrounge around in his frock and pulled out a bandolier filled with gleaming ammunition. He tossed it to Van Helsing, who pulled it from the air and slung it over his shoulder. By then Anna had sufficiently recovered from the state of shock she had been in. No. Wait. There was no time. She would want to come along, but she was safer in the house. Exiting the armory at a run, Van Helsing slammed the door behind him. The pounding coming from inside made him think that if she was upset at him for the knockout powder, she was going to be even more furious now. Van Helsing! She was shouting. He shut her out and concentrated on the task ahead, dashing outside into the stormy night. The hunt had begun. He made for the village on foot. The streets were a labyrinth of shops and homes, the only sounds were the muffled revelry coming from the many pubs. It was remarkable, Just a few hours earlier vampires attacked the village, and now people were living it up. A strange town indeed. Van Helsing wondered how much they had seen over the years. He soon reached the state of heightened concentration that he felt only when he was hunting one of the dark creatures, entirely aware of every sound, every smell, every movement in his field of vision. Anna's expression before he left her appeared in his mind. There had been something wrong with it. There was fear, but there was also something else. And how had she survived for that long in the same room with a werewolf? A smell. His prey was near, the odor was strong. "Wet dog," he said out loud. A flash of fur exploded out of a distant alley, and there was a blur of incredible speed as the werewolf weaved back and forth across the street, from doorway to doorway, getting closer and closer. Van Helsing brought his guns to bear, but somehow the creature always managed to stay one step ahead of his aim. In a single bound, it vanished into an alley 20 feet in front of him. The game had changed. A sense older and deeper than the 5 common ones told Van Helsing what it was. He took a few steps backward and said to himself, "Who's hunting who?" The werewolf was tracking him, he was sure of it, and narrow alleys were not a good place for him to face the monster. Van Helsing kept moving until he found what he was looking for, the open area of Vaseria's graveyard. There was a sound nearby. Van Helsing spun around a corner and slammed his back up against the wall, preparing himself for the attack that would come at any moment. Nothing. Quiet again, too much for his liking. Something smashed against the wall next to him. Whipping his gun around, Van Helsing pointed it at the figure by his side. In the moonlight, the cadaverous face of the undertaker looked much more like a skull than flesh and blood. Van Helsing saw what had hit the wall next to him, a coffin. The undertaker smiled down the barrels of Van Helsing's pistols, a smile as odd and joyless as his eyes. Somehow he fit well in this strange place. As Van Helsing lowered his guns, the undertaker tipped his hat, gestured at the coffin, and said, "Well, look at this. A perfect fit. What a coincidence." He headed into the graveyard carrying a shovel. "I see the wolf man hasn't killed you." "Don't worry, he's getting to it," Van Helsing replied, raising his guns again. He headed into the cemetery behind the undertaker. "You don't seem too worried about him," Van Helsing continued. "Oh, I'm no threat to him, and I'm the one who cleans up after him. If you get my meaning." Van Helsing noted that this was a man who enjoyed his work entirely too much. The undertaker broke the earth with his shovel and commenced digging a fresh grave. How much business had Dracula's minions given this man? And how long had the Count and the undertaker been in their odd, unspoken partnership? "Little late to be digging graves, isn't it?" Van Helsing asked. "Never too late to dig graves. Never know when you'll need a fresh one." A sound from behind him. Van Helsing whirled, his eyes scanning the darkness. Danger! His mind screamed, and he spun around just in time. The undertaker was swinging the heavy shovel at Van Helsing's head. Moving as if with a mind of its own, Van Helsing's hand caught it when it was inches from smashing into his face. Suddenly he wondered how unspoken the man's partnership with Dracula really was. Now the undertaker looked terrified. He saw the undertaker's glance shift slightly to one side to look briefly over Van Helsing's shoulder. That was all the warning needed. A massive blur flew out of the darkness behind him. The werewolf hit the undertaker head-on, sending his top hat flying. Together, man and beast shot 60 feet down the alley. The undertaker was dead even before the two of them struck the lamppost. Dazed, the werewolf staggered to its feet. Van Helsing's guns were already in his hands, the creature in his sights. "No!" someone shouted as hands hit his pistols, knocking them upward so that they fired into the sky. The werewolf disappeared around the corner. Van Helsing charged after it, only to see it dart into the dark forest. Anna ran up behind him, and Van Helsing furiously grabbed her by the throat, pinning her to the nearest wall. "Why?" he shouted. His grip was so tight that she couldn't breathe. "You apostrophe read. You're choking me," she sputtered. "Give me a reason not to," Van Helsing said through clenched teeth. Anna stared wild-eyed at him, frightened, but he could see that she wasn't about to tell him anything. He loosened his grip slightly. "I can't. If people knew," she said. Van Helsing studied her face and then let her go. As she struggled for breath, he felt the anger draining out of him. "He's not your brother anymore, Anna." "You knew?" "I guessed," he said. "Before or after I stopped you from shooting him?" He knew she wouldn't be happy with the answer. "Before," he said. Now it was her turn to be livid. "And still you tried to kill him? He's a werewolf. He's going to kill people," Van Helsing said, but he saw she already knew that better than anyone. "He can't help it. It's not his fault." "I know, but he'll do it anyway," he said. She studied him for a minute. "Do you understand forgiveness?" "I ask for it often," Van Helsing replied. Resolve set on her face. "They say Dracula has a cure. If there's a chance I can save my brother, I'm going after it." Anna started to storm off, but his hand shot out and grabbed her. "I need to find Dracula," Van Helsing said. "And to do it I need you, preferably alive," he added to himself. The resolve on her face faltered, and tears welled up in her eyes. Gone was the princess, the strong woman, the tough slayer of monsters. Now she looked like a girl, heartbroken and desperate to save her sibling. "I despise Dracula more than you can ever imagine. He has taken everything from me, leaving me alone in the world." She slumped back against the wall, drained. Seeing her grief, Van Helsing realized that there was something worse than having no past. To have memories of those you loved and lost is perhaps harder than to have no memories at all, he said, sighing. To help her was foolish and dangerous. It would distract him from his assignment. It might even help Dracula, and it would definitely make the Cardinal furious. So at least it had a positive aspect. Van Helsing smiled to himself and said, "All right, Anna, let's look for your brother."
Well, I do hope you enjoyed the videos so far and video game content. And don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and leave a comment down below. And I noticed 40% of you guys are not subscribed to the channel. If you can, please subscribe to the channel. It'll help me and help the channel grow. Until next time, goodbye.